2 in the morning, Saipan, the 17th of June, 1944. One man sits alone inside a turret the size of a phone booth, and the sky above him turns white. Naval star shells. The Marines have been listening to his engines for 20 minutes, and now they can see him. 44 Japanese tanks caught in the open with nothing between them and the beach. He hears the first hits before he understands them. Not shellfire, a sound like gravel thrown against a bucket, fast, all over the hull. It takes him a second to place it, and the second costs him everything. That is machine gun fire, and it is coming through. Half-inch Browning rounds are punching through the side of his tank and into the compartment where he is sitting. His armor is between 6 and 12 millimeters thick, a quarter of an inch at its best. It was specified in the mid-1930s to stop rifle fire, and against rifle fire, it worked. Against a weapon the Americans bolt onto jeeps, it is a suggestion. And the bullets are only the first thing to come through. His tank is riveted together because Japanese industry could not yet weld armor plate at scale. When something heavy strikes a riveted hull, the rivet heads shear off and travel inward. Now, the inside of the tank is full of metal that used to be the tank. There is nowhere to go. Behind his legs runs the drive shaft, hooded but exposed, straight through the crew compartment because the engine sits at the back, the transmission at the front, and the shaft has to cross the space where the men live. 2 other men share that space, and if the tank brews up, all 3 have to reach hatches designed for smaller emergencies than this one. He is not in a fighting vehicle. He is in a steel room being opened from the outside. And here is what makes it worse. That night was the exception. What these men lived inside every day was worse in a slower way. Start with the heat. The Type 95 Ha-Go was a 7.5-ton box of thin steel with an air-cooled diesel bolted into the back of it, sitting in direct equatorial sun. The armor absorbed it. The engine radiated its own heat into the compartment because air-cooled means there is no radiator to carry it away. How bad was it? The designers solved it, and their solution tells you everything. They lined the entire interior with asbestos, held off the hull by an air gap so the crew would not burn themselves on the inside of their own armor. Not a field improvisation, a specification. An engineer at a drawing board understood that these men would be scalded by contact with their own vehicle and designed around it. Then the job. In the Ha-Go, the most numerous Japanese tank of the war, the turret held 1 man. 1. He was the commander. He was also the gunner. He was also the loader. In action, he had to find the target through a vision slit, traverse a hand-cranked turret while stepping over the drive shaft running through his feet, lay the gun, fire, break the breech, load the next round himself, and at the same time command his vehicle and keep track of his platoon. In the Chiha medium tank, it was no better, and in one respect absurd. The main gun had no elevation gear, no wheel, no crank. The gunner raised and lowered a 57mm cannon by putting his shoulder against it and pushing. In an American Sherman, 5 men divided this work. In a Japanese tank, 1 man held nearly all of it, alone, in a space he could not stand up in. Then the silence. Japanese tanks had no intercom. Not a poor one, none. So the Chiha's designers built a workaround. 12 push buttons in the turret, wired to 12 lights and a buzzer at the driver's position. Turn left. Speed up. Stop. A commander fighting his tank single-handed was also stabbing at a numbered panel to steer it, hoping the man below understood which light had come on. Between tanks, it was worse. Radios were scarce. Typically, one tank in a platoon of 4 carried one, and if that tank died, the platoon went deaf. Everyone else coordinated by signal flag. To give an order to the tank beside him, a commander had to open his hatch, stand up into it, and wave colored cloth in full view of everyone who wanted him dead. Then the answer he couldn't give. By 1944, these men understood the arithmetic. The Ha-Go's 37mm gun could not penetrate the frontal armor of a Sherman at any range. The Chi-Ha's low-velocity 57mm was not even an anti-tank gun. It was built to blow open bunkers for infantry. Even the upgraded 47mm on their best tank could only hurt a Sherman from the side or rear, and only close. So a Japanese crew meeting American armor faced a machine they could not damage from the front, mounting a gun that went through them like the wall of a tent. The Marines noticed something on Saipan that says it better than any statistic. Their armor-piercing shells were the wrong ammunition. They punched in one side of a Japanese tank and straight out the other. So they switched to high explosive. Now here's the part that should stop you. Nobody was confused about this. Not the crews, not the engineers, not the general staff. And the proof isn't American, it's Japanese. Years before Saipan, the Imperial Japanese Army's own general staff concluded that the Type 95 was vulnerable to half-inch machine gun fire. They wrote it down. They understood precisely how their most numerous tank was going to die, and they acted. A replacement was designed, the Type 98, same weight, thicker welded armor, a proper 2-man turret. The prototype was finished in 1939. Production didn't begin until 1942. Around 100 were built. So when those rounds came through the hull on Saipan, they came through a weakness the Japanese Army had identified, designed a fix for, and then failed to build for 5 years. Why? Because Japan had been taught this lesson twice and drew the wrong conclusion both times. In the summer of 1939, on the Mongolian border at Khalkhin Gol, Japanese tank regiments went up against Zhukov's Red Army and were taken apart. The armored detachment lost over half the armor it committed to Soviet 45mm guns that outranged everything they carried. The tanks were withdrawn. The commanding general was relieved. The lesson was filed. Then came Malaya, and the lesson was buried. Through late 1941 and early 1942, those same obsolete tanks tore down the peninsula. At Slim River, a Japanese tank column drove straight down the road at night and shattered the British and Indian positions in its path. 4 tanks lost, more than 3,000 prisoners taken. Japanese armor didn't win in Malaya because it was good. It won because the enemy had almost no tanks at all. That victory confirmed the wrong idea. In Japanese doctrine, the tank was never a weapon in its own right. It was a tool of the infantry, a mobile gun to break bunkers and hand the ground to the riflemen. And the resources followed the doctrine. In a war between the Army and the Navy for the same steel, the Navy won every year decisively. Japan was building the largest battleships in human history, tanks queued behind them. But this is the part that should land. Japan did build tanks that could fight. The Type 1 Chi-Hei had welded, angled armor, a high-velocity gun, and a radio in every vehicle instead of a flag. Production didn't begin until 1943 because the steel went to warships. 170 were built. The Type 3 Chi-Nu carried a 75mm gun that could kill a Sherman at 1,000 meters. Fewer than 170 of those. Not one of either fought. Every one was held back in the home islands, waiting for an invasion that never came, while the men on Saipan and Iwo Jima went into battle in 1930s light tanks lined with asbestos. The scale is the whole story. Across 14 years, Japan built, by most estimates, around 6,000 tanks of every type. The United States built roughly 49,000 Shermans alone. That is not a gap in quality. That is a different category of war. And on the ground, it looked like Saipan. 44 tanks went forward at 2 in the morning on June 17, 1944, the largest Japanese armored attack of the Pacific War. 31 were dead before sunrise, some killed by Shermans, some by anti-tank guns, some by a bazooka carried by one man, some by machine guns never meant to fight tanks at all. The survivors pulled back, waited 3 weeks, and were destroyed in a banzai charge on July 7th. There was a man on Iwo Jima who understood all of this perfectly. Lieutenant Colonel Baron Takeichi Nishi commanded the 26th Tank Regiment. 12 years earlier, he had stood on a podium in Los Angeles with an Olympic gold medal around his neck, having won show jumping on a horse he bought in Italy named Uranus. He drank with Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. In 1932, he was one of the most famous Japanese men in America. His regiment's 28 tanks never reached the island. They went to the bottom of the Pacific in July 1944, torpedoed by an American submarine. Nishi went back to Tokyo, scraped together 22 replacements, and shipped out again. When he saw the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima, he did the only rational thing left. He ordered his tanks buried. Dug into the hillsides up to their turrets, packed around with sand and stone until nothing showed but the gun. He turned them into something that could not run or retreat, because the one thing his armor could still do was sit still and shoot. The Americans knew he was there. They aimed loudspeakers at the ridges and broadcast appeals for him to come out, by name, day after day. He never answered. He died somewhere in the last week of March 1945, in the rocks above the beach, and his body was never found. Somewhere under that island are the tanks he buried. Turrets down in the ash, guns still pointed at the sea. If you found this video interesting, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.